Today, I will show you how to transform a bar of soap into a zombie face. You can also carve anything you like or any face, but I was inspired by one of my students' soap carvings and I thought a zombie would be a really fun and not stressful way to practice carving. I'm using Ivory soap and a variety of carving tools, and I'll put all links to materials in my description box. If you love learning about art, hit that subscribe button so you never miss a weekly tutorial. Before you start carving, you're going to need a sketch and a design that is the exact size of the soap. So trace your soap, make a sketch, cut it out, and then you're going to do the dot-dot transfer method using a toothpick. Could you freehand it? Sure. Could you use a pencil to sketch it? Maybe. But this allows you to kind of plan things out and then transfer it to the front and back of your soap if you choose to. You don't have to get absolutely every detail, but the more detailed your sketch is, the more you want to transfer it to your soap so you can think more about carving and less about the design when you get there. I'm doing a zombie because it's fun, it's weird, and I just think it will be a nice subject. You could do anything you wanted, and if you want to look at some abstract designs, check out this soap carving tutorial that I have made before. This time I'm going for non-abstract, and I'm trying to get a scary zombie face. I am only transferring my design to the front, but you could also do it to the back and have a separate head on the back than a face on the front, or I've had students do multiple faces on both sides, which is really interesting. Start with the loop tool, which is something we use for carving clay, and start with your outer edges first. So your goal with this is to take a rectangular bar of soap that says Ivory and make it into something very different. If it still looks like a bar of soap when you're done, push yourself to carve more. You can see I'm slowly focusing on the front of the soap, and I am just trying to get my outer edges, so the shape of the head and the neck. Don't worry about your small details yet. Get the overall form or three-dimensional shape into what you designed, and then you can worry about all the details. You will see me speeding this video up, and right now I'm carving double time. I had about an hour of footage, which means this took me an hour from start to finish, and this video does not need to be an hour to capture the steps and the basic ideas of this project. So sometimes I slow down, sometimes I speed it up so that you have a quick lesson in how to carve a bar of soap, but you're gonna learn the most from doing it yourself. So you can see I'm picking up my soap a lot and really trying to make it the round shape of the head and not just a rectangle with carved lines. That's the thing with sculpting, is you're not just carving lines, you're carving shapes and forms, which can be challenging. A bar of soap is the perfect thing to practice because it smells good, it's cheap, and is easy to work with. Let's slow things down, and now that I have my outer edges carved, I'm gently carving in and mapping out my most recessed areas, or the areas that are going to be carved down the most. So outer edges first, and then your largest shapes. Always work from large to small when carving, because you might put really great details and then it might completely change based on all of the big stuff. So I want the chin to stick out over the neck. I want the mouth to really go back into space, and the eyeballs, I think I want them to stick out, but I am willing to kind of play around with it. One of the benefits of picking a zombie as my subject matter is it can look weird, crazy, and out of proportion because it's a zombie face. So I'm using this tool that reminds me of a dentist tool, and this is from a set of carving tools that I purchased. I like to use it with soap carving and plaster carving. And I will again put all of my tools that I use in my classroom in the description box. Right now what I'm trying to do is get a general idea of what areas are going to recede or go in and which areas are going to stick out. So for example, the nose, if it were not just like the bone, would stick out. The eyeballs would be rounded, but then the mouth would be really recessed, as well as the neck. So now that I have a basic idea, I'm going to speed things up a little bit and just keep slowly carving in those areas. Again, this is a sculpture, it's not a drawing. So yes, you're going to kind of draw at first, but you're thinking form, not just lines. So really make it three-dimensional and focus on your surfaces. You do not want it to appear flat. You want some things to go really far back into space, some things to be more medium, some things to stick out. And I will kind of explain as I go. You also notice that I'm picking up my soap a lot and looking at it from multiple angles. Now I'm going to kind of slow it back down, and I'm going to get this eyeball. I want it to jut out like the zombie is screaming and its eyeballs are kind of coming out of its head. So you can see I'm gently making the forehead go back into space so that the eyeball can stick out. Let's zoom in a little bit. I'm going to smooth it out as I go and do the same thing on the other side so you can see how the eyeballs are really jutting out. And since the soap can only stick out so much, this is a subtractive carving technique, or a subtractive sculpting technique, I should say. If I were doing this out of clay, I would build up areas I want raised, but if you're given a stone, a plaster cast, or soap, anything that you're carving, you have to carve down instead of build up. And that can be a little bit tricky. Most artists are more comfortable building up because it's just the way we see the world. Carving a way to find something within another shape is a little bit challenging, and that's why a bar of soap is just a great place to start, because if you mess up, it's so inexpensive and soap smells good, and it's just a simple, easy material to carve with. I'm doing the same thing with the nose area because I'm not sure if I want it to look more skeleton or more like skin and flesh, which are terrible words together. So I'm going to pretend like it's going to jut out because I can always carve it down. But once it's carved down, I can't put it back. There's no score slipping and blending soap. I have had students try it, but once it's gone, it is gone. I'm really having fun with the mouth here, and I want that to go in. I don't want it to go all the way because I do want this sculpture to be in the round. And what I mean by that is interesting from all sides. So 360 degrees of interest, not a relief sculpture where it's flat with just one viewpoint. As my facial features are getting more defined, I'm having more confidence with the outer edges of my zombie face, and I'm trying to make them more round and really play with the relationship of like how the head sticks out, the chin sticks out, and the neck kind of goes back into space. So I'm playing around with that as I carve, and it's kind of a push-pull. So what I mean by that is if something is sticking out more, to make it appear more 3D, I would maybe carve down next to it so it really pops. So it's one of those things where the more you carve, the more it really comes to life. Don't forget, it's okay for your plan to change. You might have this really great idea and the soap might break in a different way, or you might have a better idea as you get to know the surface. And sometimes when carving, the sculpture kind of tells you what it wants to be. And I know that sounds really weird and like, artsy, but really listen to what happens when you're carving. Really pay attention to the forms that appear and be flexible. Have a game plan, have a sketch, have an idea, but be flexible as you're carving because sometimes the best things that happen are accidental or not planned. I'm really enjoying this eyeball here. The one to the left is kind of jutting out of the face, and I really want to capture a little bit of an eyelid and a pupil. So I'm going in with this carving tool and trying to get as much 3D as I can in that space. I'm going to do the same on the other side, and again, I'm doing a scary zombie face, so it being not symmetrical and different sizes is a fun aspect. If I was doing like a realistic person's face, I might spend more time on symmetry, but I want this to be crazy. You can see I'm carving almost like an eyebrow there, letting the head kind of jut out, and I'm going back to the mouth, trying to find that line of how deep to carve, and I also want to give some teeth because that makes the zombie even scarier. I cleaned up my workstation a little bit because the soap was getting overwhelming, and now I'm going to work kind of on the shape of the head. Having a design for the back is a really smart idea, so that is something that I need to think about because I did only sketch the front, but I'll get there when I get there. You can see I'm using this loop tool quite a bit. It has just a nice, easy, soft carving ability with it, and I'm trying to round the back of the head. I don't want it to appear flat or have bedhead, where it's like smushed completely flat in the back, and I'm just pushing those levels of what's sticking out and what is sticking in. You're going to see a lot of repetition in this video. It's a lot of just looking and carving the same areas and really just perfecting the level of form that I want to create with my soap carving. At this point in the carving, if you have your outer edges done and you have a really good general idea of your forms, getting out a needle tool or even a toothpick, a butter knife, a tool with a fine point, a shish kebab stick, to get in those fine lines is a really fun and satisfying area to be in with this. So once you have your general areas, go ahead and start thinking about textures and small lines and details and things that are going to elevate and make it look really interesting with just the right amount of detail. So the eyes are a really important part. I'm going to get to the teeth. I'm still having a hard time with, having the mouth is great, like going in, but the lips versus tooth ratio, I'll have to keep working on. At this point, I'm going to smooth my soap with a wet brush because I want to really get in with the details, but I want my textures to be right first. So I'm using a wet paintbrush with just a little bit of water on it to smooth out those major areas. You do have to let it dry, and then you can kind of go back in and add cleaner lines once your soap has the smoother texture. So I don't want to get too in the nitty-gritty before everything's nice and smoothed out, because I am at the stage where it's time to really focus on those details. Once you let it dry, it's going to have an effect of like everything being a little too smooth. So I'm going back in with my needle tool, and again, you can use a toothpick, and I'm going to go add some lines and some textures. So now it's all about the detail. Depending on the style of your face, it could be super smooth, but again, because mine's a zombie, I want to give it some lines, some veins, some like skin that's kind of coming off, which is really gross, but you know, zombie life. And so the needle tool is going to be a really great way for me to do that. I'm finally committing to some teeth here, and I really like how it pops against that biggest area of negative space, which is the mouth that's gaping open. And I'm glad I let it dry because it will just be kind of mushy. You want the soap to kind of harden up a little bit before getting those teeny tiny details like teeth and the pupils. Now that I have been spending so much time on the front of the sculpture, I need to think about the back, since this is not a relief sculpture, but it's in the round, meaning it's interesting from all sides and angles. Think 360 degrees of interest and detail. And I'm going to be very honest here. I'm not spending nearly as much time on the back as the front. And if this were one of my students, I'm sure I would push and encourage them to make it interesting truly from all angles. You could put a second face on the back. I don't know. With this, I think I'm going to just kind of smooth it out, make it kind of round, make sure that it looks like there's a neck in the back of the head. And I'm going to play around with maybe some exposed brain. This is a zombie after all. So I'm going to scoop out some areas to kind of draw a little bit of detail to make it, you know, look like it's a zombie brain. So I'm creating kind of this gashed area, making it go in a little bit, and then I will use the needle tool to draw in a little bit of like a tissue and brain matter texture. And again, I would typically spend more detail on this, but there's nothing wrong with this sculpture, especially with the soap carving. It's only so thick because the soap is very flat, so it's not like I can make it truly round, but a little bit of detail in the back will really truly make it go a long way. I'm going to add with this same carving tool a little bit more detail in the front, because if the brain is showing in the back, there should be parts of the face that kind of are carved away as well. And now that my soap has dried and I've also gone in with a sharper tool for detail, I feel like I'm getting very close to the end of this. I'm going to keep mine. I'm not going to paint it or anything. It's just a practice carving. Really fun to do. Really fun to kind of explore what you can do with carving. The next step with this is if you were to do a clay bust where you are adding, and you would really not carve so much, but score, slip, and blend details. You could do plaster carving, which is a really fun, well, ask my students if they think it's fun, way to practice carving. And of course, you could get crazy and order some sort of stone like alabaster to really get in there and get things really technical. A soft, dry paintbrush will help clean up all those little shavings of soap that are left behind. Once you do that, then you can kind of carve out final details. And again, I'm a perfectionist, so I can never just stop getting back at it with my dry brush, and I think he's done. The back could, you know, have a little bit more detail, but the front I'm very happy with. It really is the vision of the zombie I was going for. Thank you so much for sticking around and making art with me, and if you're interested in more sculpture tutorials, check these out. Find me on Instagram at thatartteacher_Machado to see what my students are up to in my classroom, and find my website, thatartteacher.com, for full-length lesson plans, rubrics, and student examples.